This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Zach Gorchow. This week, we are diving right into what is not only our top story, but we are bringing in our guests right away, and we have two great ones. Craig Mauger and Beth LeBlanc are two heavy hitters from the Detroit News, and they broke a huge story this week. Hello, Craig.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And hello, Beth.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Beth, you and Craig came across a big story involving the governor, a grant program, and a criminal investigation. Can you start out by giving us the broad strokes of what you guys have written about, and then we'll dig deeper into it?
Yeah, so we've been following this grant given to Fay Beydoun, a donor and appointee of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, for a little more than 2 years. It was given in the 2022 budget. And throughout that time, we've heard repeatedly from the MEDC and from the governor's office that they had nothing to do with this, that they directed a lot of questions to Wentworth. The MEDC said, look, we're just essentially a pass-through for this money, and we have to abide by the law. And what we reported yesterday is that they were, in fact, aware of this project, of Fay Beydoun's desire to do a program like this for months ahead of time. She met several times with the MEDC about this idea. It was for an international business accelerator, and she received $20 million through the budget. But she had approached the MEDC months ahead of time, pitching the same idea. And in fact, telling one of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's top staffers that she had secured a nod of approval from the MEDC for this money. So it appears that there's a long paper trail showing the MEDC and the governor knew about this grant, and they also created a grant program within the governor's own executive recommendation that very closely mirrors what Fay Beydoun eventually received.
So we've been reporting on this situation for a long time. The Detroit News has done a lot of great reporting on this. We know about expensive coffee makers that Fay Beydoun was purchasing with this taxpayer funding. We know about first-class plane tickets, $550,000 salary she was paying herself from this grant, and on and on and on. The story that you published, it went live Tuesday night at DetroitNews.com. What do you think, Craig, what was the big takeaway to you? Like when once you guys put the finishing touches on the story, what was it that you felt like, boy, I hope our readers know this now?
I think there were a few takeaways. One being that there's a lot more going on here than the governor's office has informed voters of ever before. I mean, essentially, the governor's team has tried to put this all on former House Speaker Jason Wentworth, and saying basically the House Republicans had put this $20 million grant into the budget at the last second, and the governor just signed off on the budget. The reporting that we published this week shows that the MEDC CEO, Quentin Messer, was touting the fact that there was money in the governor's original budget recommendation done 5 months earlier that was there because Fay Beydoun had wanted it to be there. And it raises a whole bunch of additional questions about what did Governor Whitmer know? What did her staff know about this in February? What did they say to Speaker Wentworth behind closed doors, which eventually, during meetings that led to this money getting in the final budget? I mean, something that we talk about often as we're looking at the story is Fay Beydoun was a Democratic donor. She was a major donor to Governor Whitmer. She was a bundler for Governor Whitmer's campaign, which means she got donations from other people and gave it to the governor. So there's a direct link there between Fay and Governor Whitmer's team, her campaign team. And keep in mind, this was all going down in 2022. What also was happening in 2022? A re-election, the governor's only re-election, where she was running for a second 4-year term.
The governor's office has said, and as of this moment, which is a little after noon on Wednesday, continues to say this $20 million earmark originated in the legislature. And your reporting suggests, at a minimum, that's not the full picture of what happened, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. I mean, they have, even yesterday, presented with an email that the MEDC CEO had sent to appointees of the governor about the governor's own budget recommendation, they still maintained that we should contact former Speaker Jason Wentworth to ask about this. That's all they would essentially say on the record about what we uncovered yesterday.
And Governor Whitmer herself, she has not personally spoken out about this situation. Has she? I was trying to go back through our stories, and I'm not finding anything where she's actually addressed this, or am I forgetting something she said or done?
To my knowledge, she has not addressed this. I can't remember of an instance where she spoke directly to this grant. We'd love an opportunity to speak to her about it. I can tell you that. But we have not heard anything from her. We've just gotten, repeated responses from her office that we should speak to House Speaker Jason Wentworth. And we did in the beginning, and we did talk to Wentworth. Since then he's hired a lawyer and is cooperating with the Attorney General, according to his lawyer. But in the beginning of this, when we first spoke to him, he said, look, I had a meeting with Beydoun and she pitched this to me. But he said, I came away from that meeting thinking I'm not going to give them the grant. And he said, my name is listed as the sponsor on the grant ultimately, but he was like, I did not sponsor that. I came away from that meeting thinking I wasn't going to sponsor it. There is a lot of questions that remain unanswered about what happened the night of June 30th as the budget process dragged into July 1st, and they voted just after 2 a.m. to pass this budget.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to be talking a lot more about what's going on with the MEDC. Stick around.
All right, let's talk about Governor Whitmer and Fay Beydoun. We already knew Whitmer had put her on the executive committee that oversees the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We knew she being Fay Beydoun, had a leadership role in the Michigan Democratic Party. But thanks to the miracles of Facebook and one or both of you having the bright idea to look at Beydoun's Facebook page, we now know that not only did Beydoun host a re-election fundraiser for the governor's campaign, the governor was at the event at Beydoun's house. Those are some amazing photos you found. How significant are the connections between Governor Whitmer and Fay Beydoun?
I think they're extremely significant. I mean, I think they raised, any reporter who looked at this or heard about these facts would have their interest piqued by this. You have someone in the fall of 2021 who, according to court records, was actively pursuing grant money from the state to do this international business attraction effort. And at that same time, she's hosting a fundraiser for the governor at her house, sitting next to the governor at the fundraiser and posting on social media about this. I mean, this is something that is, the people in Governor Whitmer's inner circle clearly knew that Fay Beydoun was interested in this and allowed the governor to go to a fundraiser at her house. And then, to the points that were made earlier, it's also important to note that Governor Whitmer signed this budget, which had this grant go to Beydoun's nonprofit, essentially specifically, and had it put within the MEDC's purview, knowing that she had also appointed Fay Beydoun to the MEDC executive committee that the MEDC's leader reports to. I mean, the potential conflicts here surrounding this are just fascinating to know that state leaders kind of allowed it to play out that way with the knowledge that they very well have acknowledged having.
So I do want to follow up here on sort of the evolution of this grant. Your reporting found that it was Governor Whitmer who actually proposed the idea of a competitive grant for, I think it was called like international business incubators or something to that effect. And it sort of went through the typical legislative budget process. It evolved, it changed pretty dramatically, I think. But then as Beth, you were mentioning sort of around, overnight on July 1st, it morphs into this $20 million earmark, meaning you're not going to take applications for the money and the MED decides who gets it. It's just straight up earmarked to an entity that only could have been Global Link based on the legislative language. So playing devil's advocate here for a moment, how can we be sure that what really started out as this $15 million competitive grant program actually is what became of the $20 million earmark? Is there really a direct tie between the two? Whichever one of you wants to take that.
Well, I think the direct tie is Fay Beydoun at the end of the day. I mean, the language that the governor proposed, and we were clear in our reporting about this, the language she proposed was for a competitive grant program, right? Like whoever applied for it would have had to submit an application for it and go through the rigors of an application process. But it's very clear from Quentin Messer's email after the governor's executive recommendation, where he congratulated Fay on advocating for this issue, on championing it and getting it into Whitmer's budget. So we know that Fay Beydoun was involved with that. And then we know that eventually in the budget, there was a direct earmark for her with language that is very, very similar to that International Business Accelerator. So the biggest change in that is that it went from a competitive grant program under the governor's recommendation and then to an earmark on what eventually passed and was signed by the governor. But the common thread through all of that is Beydoun's involvement and the fact that she would qualify for this at the end of the day. And, we actually, I thought it was interesting this time around, we talked to Representative Greg Van Workum, who was managing the Leo budget for the House at that time. And he said, yeah, I remember seeing this in the executive recommendation because he was also very interested in innovation funds and incubator funds. And he said, I remember seeing it and wondering who it was for. Then he had a program that would have created like a sort of another competitive grant program for incubator funds. And that was replaced with the language for the earmark. And he said he and his staff were scratching their heads after the budget passed, trying to understand who this was going through. And he really didn't know until we reported that it was going to this global link run by a Whitmer donor.
And a couple other notes on that, other things that are very worthwhile to mention is that Fay Beydoun, up until where this got put into the governor's budget recommendation in February 2022, for multiple years had been having meetings on and off and pitching the governor's team and people around the governor on her idea for this program. And in some of the documents that were in the court records, she references Global Link in 2021 before Global Link is even formed as a nonprofit later in 2022. So the idea that, these are two separate things, Fay in the court records was very clearly pitching them on this very similar plan consistently for multiple months. She was giving indication that the governor was getting on board with this plan. So it's not like, the governor had this drop from the sky. We should do international business attraction. I mean, that was an idea that was being pushed by Fay Beydoun. Quentin Messer acknowledges that. And, I've talked to other people who work in international business recruitment in Michigan, and they have told me, I've asked them repeatedly, do you have any knowledge of this? And they have said, I had no knowledge that this was even in the budget. No one approached me about doing this. These are people with, well-known organizations in the state that work in this arena. So it raises a lot of other questions about, when you say competitive grant program, what exactly were they designing? What stakeholders had they met with? As you know, Zach, some things get put in the budget in initial proposals to start a conversation so they come back to them later and revise them. What's in the initial budget presentation might not be the designs of where someone wants it to eventually end up.
There's still a lot of mystery, though, here. I mean, a big unknown remains who is responsible for converting this concept from a $15 million competitive grant into a $20 million earmark to a company that didn't yet exist and based on the legislative wording could only match what would become Fay Beydoun's Global Link.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think the frustrating part about all of this is that if people just would have been upfront right from the beginning, it's likely they wouldn't have had 2.5 years of bad press. And this whole issue and teasing things out and pulling on thread after thread after thread, I mean, it's just excruciating for everyone involved, right? I'm sure the MEDC doesn't like to answer repeated questions about this and wishes it would go away at the end of the day. But this could have been resolved if people were just upfront about how that occurred. And instead, we're 2 years into coverage trying to pull on threads repeatedly. The AG is involved. It's really like a whole of government approach to pulling the Band-Aid off as slowly and painfully as possible.
So I'm going to jump ahead to a question that I had on my mind, but it fits now with what you were just saying, Beth. In general, when Governor Whitmer has been faced difficult news stories during her time in office that raised questions about whether she or her administration erred in some way, the general media strategy usually seems to be to provide little to no comment. And the governor doesn't appear in public for long stretches where she might face questions. And they just try to wait out the news cycle. I was looking at yesterday. I don't think she's taken questions from news media in Lansing in 2 months, since early May. She's done very limited interviews since then. I think she did 1 or 2 on Mackinac Island during the Detroit Regional Chamber event. But she really hasn't been seen or heard from in public very much lately. Do either of you think she's going to be able to ride this out? Are they going to be able to use their kind of typical wait for everybody to move on strategy with this?
It's an excellent question, and one that I've thought about a lot, but it is something that has been an evolution of, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this too, Zach, but just an evolution of, it used to be, not that long ago, that the people that work in state government felt that they had a duty to at least answer the questions that reporters were submitting to them to some degree, because they were being funded by the taxpayers and they were there to answer those questions. And right now, increasingly what you're seeing is people who just don't answer questions at all. I mean, we could send a list of 20 questions about this grant, meaningful questions, and they will still respond with, go ask Jason Wentworth about it. And it's like, we're not asking Jason Wentworth, we're asking you as the spokesperson for the governor to provide answers to these questions, and they are still directing us to Jason Wentworth. It's this is apparently, it's not just the governor's team. I mean, it's increasingly how politicians' teams are handling this. We're going to talk about what we want to talk about, and you're not going to make us get off message, obviously, is what they're trying to do. But the only way to combat that in journalism is to keep digging. I mean, we are finding primary source emails that show exactly what was going on inside this team's mind as they were pursuing this. And if they choose not to respond, we're going to find more, because we're just going to keep digging. We're not going to stop because they refuse to answer questions, right? I mean, that's increasingly what the mindset has to be. Just keep digging. And if they choose, increasingly, if they choose, hey, we're only going to answer the questions that we like from people that we like, that's their tactic. We can't pay any mind to what they're doing, basically.
I don't think it's slowed us down at all. I mean, maybe it slowed us down a little bit, but it's, at a certain point, unfortunately, is what you come to expect. And you just have to be prepared for it and not to stop. And there is their decision how they respond to this, or whether or not they respond. And I think the public can make informed decisions based on that.
What about the Attorney General investigation in all of this? The records made public so far have indicated that people at the MEDC are merely witnesses, albeit with important third-party information, but not, let's underline that, not suspects. What's the latest in the criminal inquiry?
I guess what has driven a lot of the really heightened coverage of this in the past couple of weeks is the Attorney General's raid of the MEDC headquarters in downtown Lansing on June 18th. She also served a search warrant at Fay Beydoun's home in Farmington Hills that same day. And that is something that is very unusual to see a AG's office serve a search warrant on a state agency. And it usually implies a lack of cooperation from that agency. And the AG's office has argued that is the case. In their filing, they provided, months of emails between the AG and the MEDC where they were corresponding back and forth about what information they were seeking. And honestly, the emails back and forth after reviewing them, they seemed a little reminiscent to some of the responses I was getting about where nobody says no directly, but they require you to go after public records on your own. And that's an approach that they've taken to reporters, but apparently it's an approach that they've taken to the Attorney General's office as well.
So majority Republicans in the Michigan House are digging into this situation too. We know that they have requested information from the MEDC. We know they've been looking into this as well. What's the latest there? What do we think is happening? And what could the legislature potentially do as the revelations continue?
I mean, I think the House is in a tough spot as they've tried to do some oversight on this too, because, there is a former Republican House Speaker who's entangled in this. Some of the people that are still serving in the House were in the House when this grant went through. And then, complicating this is that there is now an Attorney General probe that is very active and going into this. And you wonder, Beth has talked more to the oversight chairman than I have, but you wonder how much they'll want to get in front of what the AG is working on. We've seen this in past investigations like Lee Chatfield. The oversight committee didn't want to kind of get in the way of what Attorney General Nessel's office was doing. But you wonder, I've wondered this for a long time. Why is the legislature apparently so disinterested in investigating what happened with some of these grants that they handed out? You would think that this would be a prime issue for lawmakers to figure out what went wrong when we handed out billions of dollars kind of in the middle of the night in July 2022 through this budget, having oversight hearings about where the money went through all of these, figuring out how much money did not go to what it was supposed to go to. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that, we're having maybe our third round of oversight hearings about COVID response, and some of these things have still not gotten any answer. I think that's noteworthy. And I think people are right to question, hey, why haven't you been more out front looking at how this money was spent and what's going on? I mean, some of the money hasn't even been expended yet, it doesn't seem. So did I miss anything, Beth, that the oversight chairman had said?
No, I think I know House Oversight, I believe in June, they requested further information from the MEDC. And in the court hearing between the MEDC and AG, where they were kind of arguing about the fate of these documents that they seized, the AG's office acknowledged that it was in part the pending release of those documents to the legislature that caused them to go into the agency and seize some of these documents, because they knew that they would be made public shortly by giving them to the House Oversight. But yeah, I mean, I think there have been questions over the past several months about when they were going to address this or how oversight would address it. And I asked House Speaker Matt Hall, and he kind of brushed it off and said, well, we're not looking into this. We're looking into bigger dollar amounts. We've addressed that with House rules that we can't do those types of earmarks anymore. And now we're moving on, and we're going to move on to bigger dollar amounts and more recent issues. So that's a choice.
We should mention too, the Senate Democrats, there's been not a peep out of them. They've got an oversight committee too. And there's been no signal of any movement there whatsoever. I'm not sure what to take away from that, other than that they're not prepared to investigate a governor of the same party.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I mean, everything I said was applying to both the House and the Senate. I mean, I think the Senate Oversight Chairman's wife was working for the MEDC at the time that all of this happened, which is another complicating factor, but is something that should be noted. I mean, both the Senate and the House don't seem very open to going back and opening up this can of worms of how this money was spent and where the money went.
Yeah, and it should be noted too that last year, after we reported on the $4,500 coffee maker and the Budapest ticket and all of that, that the House and Senate, in fact, did propose language to claw back these grants, or said they were working on it. And then it never appeared in the final budget. And that was under Democratic control of both the House and the Senate. And the response we got when we asked, why didn't you guys claw back this funding in the budget like you promised? They said that they could not reach a consensus. And that's basically the only response we got on why it wasn't included.
Okay. Craig Mauger, Beth LeBlanc, thank you so much for joining us here on MichMash.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.